Welcome to the Disability Adventures podcast. I'm Andrea Anderson.
And I'm Chip Dodd from Team Disability.
Are you ready to push your limits, conquer the unknown, and actually train like an adventure racer?
This episode is sponsored by Nick Herf, elite athletic coach, seasoned adventure racer, and the go-to expert for building endurance, grit, and next-level performance.
Whether you're training for your first 5K, your next ultra, a multi-day expedition race, or recovering from an injury, like I am, Nick Herf offers personalized coaching plans that fit your goals, your schedule, and your life. With a deep background in real-world racing and a science-based approach, you'll get more than workouts, you'll get results.
It's not just about finishing, it's about thriving through every challenge. Remote coaching? Yep. Custom plans? Absolutely. Motivation and accountability? That's what he does best.
Check him out at nickherfcoaching.com and tell him we sent you.
That's NICKHURFF coaching.com.
We have with us today Chrissy van Assendelft. She is on the podcast. She's a good friend, first off, but we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago when we stopped by their house. They live in Lexington, Virginia, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place to live, a nice property, and they're really gracious hosts. But we had a great conversation about recovery and a lot of like women's health issues, and fairly specific to what I'm going through because I'm recovering right now. And, there's a lot that plays into just, how to stay healthy. And she's also an adventure racer. And so is her husband, Dirk. You might remember that Dirk did the White Ascension with us in 22. Was that 21?
21, I think.
21. Yep. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Anyway, Chrissy, let's start with just your adventure racing background.
Yeah. So I came from a super sort of active lifestyle. So I grew up on a farm and then went to college, Virginia Tech, majored in dairy science. And I left college knowing I was joining the military. I did my 6 years. I got out. I went to work on a farm. And then slowly as life sort of developed, I ended up turning into a high school biology teacher. So that's sort of my background for how I ended up to where I, met Dirk and then met him in 2013. And we did our first adventure race together in 2014. And it was a bit ambitious. I was completing my master's in 9 months.
Wow.
And so I thought I had completed all my coursework before going into a 24-hour race. And I realized the morning of the race that I still had a paper to write for one of the classes. And so like before the race, I am like madly like typing up this paper and sending it off before like we leave the hotel and I lose internet connectivity. Like I have no idea what that paper said. I have no idea my grade on it. It was crazy going into it.
But you passed. You have your degree.
Yeah, it was Ronnie Angel's Odyssey race that he did out of Lake Philpott. It was one of the last ones that they did before he sort of quit doing adventure racing.
Yeah, that's a
hosting
neat
adventure
area.
races.
Yeah, I wish they had a race up there again. Someone needs to have a race there.
Michelle said a couple there. I've done 2 there now. I did a adrenaline rush with her, and I think we just went back there. Or was it? Maybe it was a second adrenaline rush this March. Dirk and I did that race again this year. It was the pack
I've just missed them. So your first race was an Odyssey race. How long was it?
It was a 24-hour, but we only made it about 12 hours in before Dirk's bike exploded. The pedal spring mechanism came apart, and then something else came apart on his bike.
Oh my gosh. Was it his first race also?
No, he had done quite a few by then. He had done a bunch of sort of balance bar things. He and Michelle Fachet were on a race together. He and his brother raced a lot. So like I sort of just joined Team Lazy Man Running.
Okay.
And it was kind of funny because he's like, well, do you know how to read a topo map? I'm like, yeah. He's like, kind of like hesitantly hands it to me at the start. And basically I drop him right on top of the checkpoint. He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, you can have it now."
Yeah,
And so
and you're always your primary navigator, right? When you guys are racing together.
mostly, I mean, I will say sometimes that I feel like there's a certain amount of having your nav juju on, and there's some times that it is just not working. And then that's where it's great that I can just be like, "Babe, today's my day. I need help." And
Yeah,
sometimes it'll come back in a race again. And then it's great to have him also as a navigator on it because I feel like um if he questions me on something and I'm absolutely certain we know that like, all right, I have solid contact with the map, I feel good about it. And if he questions me on something, I'm like, ooh, wait. It's always a good sort of check of, all right, how in contact with the map are both of us, and let's
yeah,
just triple check before we make a decision we can't return from.
yeah. That
So
sounds like a perfect duo. Anyway, we're not
yeah.
necessarily here to talk about the race specifics, but then, so how much racing would you say you do and have done?
We probably do. I would say at a minimum 3 races a year. I think one year we did close to 7 or 8. We're so fortunate to live in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, where A, it's excellent training ground, but then B, there's so many race directors within just a short drive that we don't have to do ridiculous things. I mean, we don't do the near the traveling that you guys do. We've gone to Florida. I've gone twice, and Dirk's gone a third time to do the C to C. But other than that, I mean, everything is here local. Michelle puts on great races.
Yeah,
Mark Latanzi has put on some great Rogaine stuff. Mark Harris has put on some great races out of there. Broad Run's put on some good things.
yeah.
We've
Those
done
are
some stuff
all
with
great
Rootstock.
adventure
Yeah.
race directors, companies. Yeah, Rootstock too. Um,
And it's just
yeah,
so much easier to knock them off if it's just taking off a Monday and a Friday,
yeah,
to get to and from the race. And I don't have to change a lot about my life outside of it, particularly when the girls were younger.
yeah.
Um, but
So
yeah.
you're really comfortable in the outdoors. You've done quite a lot of racing, and I know you've dealt with some setbacks here and there. Um,
To put it
so
mildly.
and that's why I feel like you just have the greatest advice because you're first off, you're really thorough in all of the research you do. And I just feel like when I talk to you, it's like talking to an encyclopedia. Like I feel like you must have like a photographic memory because you just have a good grasp of it seems like everything you've ever read or listened to. So, let's get into any injuries that you've had that has, made you kind of try to take the next step in taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of had your typical injuries, overuse stuff periodically, sort of going into things. I think 2020 is probably when I started seeing flashing lights in the dashboard and just ignored them. So, like, the amount of stress I was under at work, I was clenching my teeth so badly in my sleep, I broke a molar,
Wow.
like, snapped it down all the way through the root.
Wow.
Um, And that was kind of the first indication. And then I still wasn't smart enough to leave that position. And things just kind of kept falling off. And so I ended up down the route of a bunch of things that they've sort of just labeled as autoimmune disorders. So I had a frozen left shoulder in 2021. I mean, I think the hardest thing about a frozen shoulder is it's not like you broke your foot, right? And on day one, you have a broken foot. You go in, you get it set, you get in a cast, and there's somewhat of a known process of this is the way this is going to progress. For mine, they're like, we don't know why it caused it. It started freezing July of 2020, and it took it until February to freeze all the way. And now I had to get it all the way unfrozen, which ended up taking about a year and a half. And about, I guess, 2 months or a month before the freezing started, um, Dirk's mom fell and broke her hip during COVID. He went down to Atlanta to be with her. I had 2 steaks in the freezer that we were supposed to eat. I had a steak one night for dinner, had carrots with it, was fine. Next night, ate a steak and carrots again. It was simple, it was easy. and went through anaphylactic shock that night. So like, I don't know, midnight, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, woke up. It was bizarre at the time. I remember thinking I'd read articles about snakes crawling, or not snakes, spiders, not snakes, spiders crawling in your mouth at night while you sleep. And I was like, huh, I wonder if one of them got me. And so I got up and took Benadryl and a couple other things, and then sort of went back to sleep and didn't think anything about it. And then I woke up in the morning and I wasn't feeling great. And I was actually trying to decide, like, do I go for a run? Do I not go for a run? Um, and I went to go brush my teeth and realized when I went to go swallow, when I took a swig after I brushed my teeth, my epiglottis didn't have room to move to cover up my airway. So it went down my esophagus
Wow.
because things were still that swollen. And I hadn't
Wow.
realized they'd gotten that bad. And this is where, like, I'm not, had not been, I've gotten better on reading cues from my body. Like up until that point, I was kind of like, oh, you can push through it. You can go for a run this morning. Like not even kind of fathoming that I've basically barely avoided like deathly anaphylactic shock, but certainly not good. Um, so that was sort of one night. The next night, well, I've gone to my GP the next day, and she's like, "You probably have alpha gal. Avoid red meat." I'm like, "Okay." And so I do, and I think at some point I had some sort of dairy product that day, and I went through anaphylactic shock again the next night, and it was actually worse.
Wow.
And the sneaky part about sort of alpha galish related things is that it happens 6 hours after the exposure. And
Wow.
so it's really hard to know. Whereas like a shellfish allergy, like someone eats it and you immediately see the hives and the whatever else. Like these kind of allergies are really hard to pinpoint just because the reaction is so far after the thing you've eaten that it's hard to guess what the thing was that caused it.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to figure out why you were having the alpha gal type of response, and maybe tell our listeners what that actually is, and how did you figure out what it was from?
So short version is they told me it was probably alpha gal. I got tested for it, and the test was extremely inconclusive, and landed me more in do you have an idiopathic autoimmune disorder than true alpha gal. So true alpha gal scores you have usually sort of test results in the whole numbers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s if you have anaphylactic shock. And I was a 0.64, and anything under a 2 is questionable about whether or not you even have it, much less anaphylactically, which sort of builds on. So I kept on getting hives. And so they're like, all right, well, quit poultry. The hives kept going. They're like, quit eggs. The hives kept going, and the swelling and the itching and all the other stuff. And so at that point, they're kind of like, go vegan, and we'll see if it finally clears up. And it took about a month.
And at the time, weren't you even questioning if that was a response to a tick?
Correct. So I had gotten over Mother's Day weekend some wicked chigger bites. And they were just gnarly. I've never had any like it before. I've never had any since. And you could still see the scar marks from them at Thanksgiving that year. That's how bad they were.
Wow.
And so there was some hypothesis about maybe it wasn't a true alpha gal because it was a different. So alpha gal is an part of what the spit of a tick is. And sort of very unusually, in the mammal line, humans are the only ones without it as part of your cell structure. And so your body, in an effort to fight off ticks, is like, well, I'm going to become allergic to this thing. And then when you ingest mammals that have that thing on it, your body reacts to it. So your body's pretty smart in its own way. I mean, it's saying like these ticks have been getting me, let me get them before they get me. And it just happens to have the side effect of what we eat in our diet.
Yeah, so some people could get bit by a particular tick, and then they would be essentially allergic to meat after
Yep.
that. And that was what was one of your concerns at the time. That was
Yep.
then you figured out, no, it's an autoimmune response. And so you've been dealing with certain setbacks and just health issues that have, like I said before, have made you an expert, I think, in diagnosing yourself and just trying to be the healthiest you can be. And you have done it gracefully. I've been visiting you when you're like, I can't go biking today because my shoulder is frozen. Um,
Yep.
and you've worked through all of those things, and yeah, it's been impressive. And I think it's
I w
important for everyone, that's an adventure racing person that's listening. They could be in the same boat and they might, it kind of applies to all of us. These are not just the things we're going to talk about aren't just for if you're injured. It's basically,
Correct.
what's the latest out there that, can help us be the best person we can be. So,
Yeah.
um, so you've battled frozen shoulder, you've battled
Yeah, my right then
autoimmune.
froze 2 years later.
Yeah, so each
So
side.
both have gone through it. Yep.
Yeah, is there anything else I mean, that's
I went
plenty that you've had to
I
deal
went
with.
through a brief period of what they call chronogenic urticaria, which is like usually where you will have a response not to a anything you engage in, but the actual temperature. So some people have it around cold, some people have it around hot, and for me it was around hot. And so I was training and then ran the Marine Corps half marathon in 2022. And in the weeks leading up to that, I kept on randomly breaking out in hives, and I finally figured it out that it was sunlight. And so that's when I think you and Chip had visited me, me and Dirk, and I was also gluten free. So it worked out really well for him because I couldn't have any either. So we had options around. But yeah, so that was sort of the other sort of blind alley I ended up in and sort of
And
worked my way back
you
out of.
you've been able to sustain your activity level. Like I've been really impressed by that. You've kept running, you've kept doing what you're able to do. And that's really cool. So, where should we start? I know we talked about the importance of um, protein.
Yep.
How important is it? What is it important for? How much should we have? What do
Yeah.
you think?
So I would say one thing about I didn't end up here after all those things, like in the blink of an eye. So there was a time that there was a lot of anger, frustration, which I'm sure you can probably relate to.
Yeah.
And for me, it was sort of, I think, compounded because whereas you have a return to fitness schedule and it's predictable and it's for me, it was kind of like, well, they didn't know. And
That's
so they're like, well, either live with it or maybe try some things you think might help. Um, and so I will say, sort of the saving grace in all this was, I think one of the things that adventure racing really teaches you is to, like the idea of controlling your mind and not letting it go places it doesn't need to go because it burns up energy you don't need to.
hmm
And then just the idea of building resiliency. So part of what I think helps build resiliency is to take frustration and turn it into curiosity. And that's what's gotten me digging into a gazillion different things,
That is
right?
such
So
great advice. We need to
yeah,
remember
so
that.
that's kind of how I've ended up where I'm at today, but I was not here in 2020. I wasn't here in 2021. I think as well-meaning as people were to ask about why I was out of the sport, it was almost as maddening to talk to them because they'd be like, "Well, what is it and why?" I'm like, if I had those answers,
Yeah.
I would feel better, but I don't. And the more people that would ask me that, the more frustrated I got. And so I finally just realized like it wasn't something they were going to get because I didn't get, and I just started glossing over it. Like I've got alpha gal or whatever else, like the simplest thing for them to understand
hmm
and to sort of diffuse the situation and move it in a positive direction. So if
Yeah.
it's ever helpful to come up with your own coding for that, I will say like it does help to sometimes deflect from going in negative directions if you can just find a way to
Yeah.
keep focused on the curious and finding what does and doesn't work for you.
Yeah. I just think that's really great advice. I'm really understanding that right now. And it also makes me feel like I owe you an apology for some of the
No,
times where I didn't necessarily appreciate um, just the depth of what you were going through because you're a really level-headed person and you're always fun to be around. So I think, going through what I've been going through, like you don't necessarily understand what's underneath of that until you go through something Similar. And again, I'm not going through the same things that you've been through, but a little bit similar.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
anyway,
I think there's no comparing sort of struggle. It's pointless in life. I think all
yeah,
you can do is support people in whatever it is they're going through and just keep right on rolling.
absolutely.
But yeah. But to bring it back to your question, which is where you started, which was
Yeah.
protein. I sort of discovered it by doing everything wrong. So you just heard everything that was removed from my diet. I asked my GP for a referral to nutritionist, and she's like, "Oh, you don't need that." And I just kind of took it and rolled with it, and I did not spend enough time digging into how much is enough protein. And it's complicated because if you look at, the generic, you need however many grams of protein after working out of leucine specifically. It takes 25 grams of dairy product to do it. It takes 50 of soy in order to hit those
Mm.
leucine levels. And so it takes a lot more, if you're going to change your diet that drastically, it took a lot more research than I did. So the short version is, I went vegan, and at the time I was like, oh, I might try to lose a little bit of weight. And so I was basically eating like half a salad kit for lunch, half a salad kit for dinner, and that was about it. And I kind of lost weight for, about a month, and I quit. And I was like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on, but okay. And so then it was like, oh, well, I'll train for a half marathon. So I ran that in 2022, and I was like, oh, well, I didn't lose enough weight. Maybe I need to train for a full marathon. And my gut was just so unhappy. I mean, all the allergies didn't help me. If I was stressed, things that I could normally eat, I could no longer eat. It was just a hot mess. And so I was like, I'll train for a full marathon. And all of a sudden, like, I'm sore all the time. I'm fatigued all the time. I started having 2 periods a month. No one could explain what was going on. I'd back off from training after the marathon. My right shoulder was freezing. And the periods would go back to regular, but the instant I started exercising regularly again, they go back to 2 a month. And I was just like, I just don't get it. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
This is frustrating. It was horrible for races because it basically meant every single race I had that year, it was dealing with like period on top of everything else. And there weren't any answers. It was basically like, well, you're kind of your own patient zero, go find the answers. And it turns out if you don't eat before you marathon train, your body will basically use the mucosal lining in your gut as an energy source. So anything you put in it afterwards, it's going to run through you. And it turns out if you don't have enough protein to build muscle, your body's constantly trying to break down muscle somewhere else to build muscle somewhere else because it doesn't have the amino acids to do it in its diet. And lo and
Wow.
behold, if it gets to the point, so enzymes are what drive everything, including the development of like protein-based hormones, which are from your pituitary, which then trigger your cycle. And so if those don't show up at correct times, you get 2 periods a month because basically you never get the trigger for an ovulation. So it's like, well, it didn't happen this time. Let me try again, and it'll try again, and it'll try again.
Wow.
And
And
so,
meanwhile, you're thinking you're doing everything absolutely right. Right in in quotes. You're not eating much, and what you
yep,
are eating is completely healthy. It's vegan.
yep.
How much healthier can you get?
Can you get?
So
Yep.
I imagine you were really, really frustrated. So then you started adding things back in, or how did you realize what you needed to change?
About a year in, um, she was like, try a shrimp, a bite of shrimp, give yourself 2 weeks, see what happens. And I could handle it. And it was a lot easier for me to start hitting my numbers, if not on a daily basis, on a, few times a week. I would actually get my the protein numbers I actually needed. And almost immediately I started feeling better.
And how did you decide what protein numbers you needed?
So Stacy Sims is an excellent source. Um, she is a woman's-based researcher that is amazing. I 3 years ago signed up for her Menopause 2.0 class. If you ever have a spare $300, I cannot express enough how much it's worth your time, money, and effort to spend time with that. I don't think we realize how much information out there is based off of research. And even if women were included in the rarely were they actually included in the data analysis because they were considered anomalies. And they're considered anomalies because, lo and behold, unless you normalize women's data based off of a menstrual cycle, they'll always appear erratic. So she was probably the first person I ever heard really digging into it. I think her tagline is "Women are not small men," which is basically how we've been treated. So all the nutrition guidelines that I would say your average general practitioner still today operates from are taking sedentary male men of approximately the same body fat composition. Usually they didn't reach that until they're in their 60s or 70s.
Wow.
And they applied it to women.
Wow.
Because they said, well, we can't study women. They're not predictable. The data's not good. And so she was probably the first one I knew that did women-specific data. And so that I think I discovered her slightly later in my journey. And earlier in my journey, Simon Hill, fascinating guy. If you never have something to do with your time, spending a little bit of time deep diving into him is fascinating. He has a podcast called The Proof. Short version is cardiovascular disease runs in his family. He didn't think he could do anything about it. His brother went vegetarian and vegan, and he wondered why. And in short, he couldn't figure out what he was actually supposed to do, what was the right thing to do, because he felt like he kept on reading conflicting news stories. So he went back and he got his master's degree in how to decode research science. That's all he does. And
Wow.
so he digs into studies and will tell you, like, well, this is the results of that study, but it was flawed because it was sponsored by the egg industry. And if you notice, their control group had like people that were inactive and sedentary, and they were comparing it against people who were active. And so that's a faulty, research design.
Yeah.
Or this was done in mice, or it was only done on 4 people, or like here's what you can like say from that, but how much of that is science that's transferable to actual people today, and what are the limitations and conclusions that we can draw from the study?
I really want to start listening to that. Tell me his name again.
Simon Hill.
Simon Hill with The
Yep.
Proof.
Yep. It was
And
originally called The Proof is in the Plants, and then he decided he was going to make it broader.
I just feel like I'm going to be angry after listening to every one of those because that's so frustrating to think they're basically passing off data as truth. And really,
I think
it's
the
been,
beauty of it is there are some things that are misconceptions, but most of what we were told as kids still stands today. I mean, there was the whole "is butter bad for you, is margarine better for you" that I think was a bit of a flip flop. But I think for the most part, as much as we have huge portions of our food that we consume that everyone's trying to advertise something to you, it's probably the things that aren't being advertised that you should be eating.
yeah,
So, I mean, how often do you see a advertisement for sweet potatoes, or whole grains, or for any number of other things? Those are the things you never see advertisements for because they're a naturally produced thing
and
that's in the
anything
food
that's
supply.
not
They're minimally
processed.
changed. Yep.
Yeah.
They have all the good fiber still in them.
Hmm. So you had told me about Stacy Sims, and after that, I keep hearing her name pop up all over the place. I've all just, and I probably had heard of her before, but I agree, she's definitely one to follow. Um,
Yep.
okay, so that brought us around to
So
how did you figure
Stacy
out how much
Sims.
protein you should have?
Yep. So she basically came down, and she has a little bit of guidance, and I will say I'd still have to marry her data somewhat with Simon Hill, because where she's an expert in is people who don't have dietary restrictions. And there's a few times I found a little bit of her suggestions around people that are vegan. Her basic thing is, well, you can do this, but ultimately it would be better if you just ate everything. Like, not understanding, like, for some people that's simply not an
Not
option.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do still have to marry sort of those two pieces together on and off. But in general, it is between 2.7 to 3.5 grams per kilogram of lean mass. And so roughly the idea is when you're at your fighting weight, which I feel like few of us rarely are. But for your height, you can sort of guess. And if you do a bone density scan or any of the DEXA things, it'll actually literally tell you what your lean mass is. You sort of figure it out from there. And for me, if I'm truly going to hit all of them, it's close to 30 grams per meal. And if I can't hit it in a meal, then I have to have snacks to sort of supplement to hit those numbers. I will say I am The day that an app comes out that works, that lets me scan my food and then tells me what my numbers are, I will be happy because I am not a counter. It is not my thing. It's not where I
Yeah.
live. It doesn't do good things to my brains when I start obsessing about it. I don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of will roughly track and look at the back of things when I'm sort of meal planning to sort of figure out, all right, that would be roughly about in the neighborhood of that for a day. And there's sometimes I probably go over a little bit, but usually if I err, it tends to be on the underside, not purposefully, but it's just some of the limitations of like I think for me to hit 30 grams of proteins in black beans, it means I'm eating 3 cups. Three
A
cups
lot.
for one meal. I can't
Wow.
do that.
Do you use
My
any
stomach will
protein
not handle that
powders?
much fiber. You can. There's one called Veg. That's a vegan one that I kind of have to rely on because a lot of the others tend to have a whey in it, and my stomach does not do that.
Mm.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So there was also one thing you mentioned about a particular study of, I think it was desk workers as
yes.
opposed to active people. And I don't know. You need
So
to sum that up for me. Remind me what that study was about.
absolutely, I actually looked it up, and I will share the link with you if you want to put it in your show notes.
Yeah, I
But
will.
fascinating study. It was only on, I want to say 12 people in each study. So again, not super conclusive, but sort of hints at good things. It was conducted in Iran, and I can't remember the name of the institute at the moment. But basically, they took 2 groups of what they considered to be normal overweight women, so not in the obese range, but overweight. And they took one of them and they made 15% of their caloric intake for the day was protein. And they took the second one and made 25% of their total caloric intake for the day from protein. But they ate the same number of calories, they didn't exercise anymore. Um, and their total body mass actually didn't shift much. They more or less weighed the same at the beginning and end of the study. But the fascinating part was the DEXA scan. And the women that they gave the 25% protein diet suddenly had much more lean mass, and the fat they stored was intermuscular. So, um, to back up and diverge, I'm from a farming background. Most of the cows you eat are male, and the reason is that they will actually put fat into muscle, which means when you cook your steak, it has moisture to it. It has juice. The fat melts. It makes it delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Women, not women, females in general, will almost always put all their fat subcutaneously. So you'll have a complete solid muscle mass, and then you'll have your fat around that. And it probably has to do with women and their ability to convert energy and that kind of thing. But it's also somewhat unhealthy at times. But what they found with that group of women, when they upped the protein intake, they went from carrying their fat more subcutaneously to carrying it intermuscular, which is a lot less dangerous metabolically. So you get better glucose control, you get a bunch of other things that come with it. So just kind of super fascinating that women that you don't change anything about, if you just up the protein intake, it really does take a larger volume of that for a woman to actually put that into muscle. And
Wow.
you almost have to have it in excess for it to happen.
And essentially, they don't need to change anything about what they're doing except add more protein in order to have more lean mass.
Correct.
Is what you want. You want more lean mass,
You
less
do. And if you can store
less of
your
that
fat
subcutaneous
intermuscularly instead
fat.
of
Yeah.
subcutaneous, yep.
Yeah. Interesting. And as far as when you should eat protein, is there
Yes.
any?
Um, Again, like with the thing with me running completely fasted for marathon training because I couldn't trust my stomach not to have to divert from the trail. Um, never do anything fasted is a short version, particularly if you're reaching that perimenopausal part of your life, which I happen to be in. Um, I think it's roughly 100 to 150 calories, 15 grams of protein, and I think it's 25 grams of carb is what you want to be hitting before you go out in the morning and do anything.
So you want that before you work out.
Correct.
Is there anything? How about what about afterward?
So, short version is I think men have a window of almost 3 hours. Women only have a window of about 45 minutes to get it in. So,
Wow.
if you want to, there's two different sort of muscle building reactions. So anabolic is put on muscle, catabolic means you're breaking down muscle. And exercise in and of itself, you're constantly breaking down muscle to build it back differently, which can be a good thing if you're trying to get improvements. But shortly after exercise, your body will automatically go into that catabolic state unless you bring amino acids on board. And so you're looking at some type of real meal within 45 minutes. And there's some, I mean, it's one of those things that some protein is better than no protein, but getting it from a protein shake is actually not the best thing for you, because if you have fiber with it, your uptake of protein really goes up. And so you're looking at probably like Greek yogurt with your oatmeal or something like that in the morning, to help bring those numbers up. And to consume it with fiber is better than not. But if you can't do it, a shake is better than nothing. So,
Wow, that is all
yeah.
just really interesting. I feel like this might be similar to some of our other podcasts where I'm going to have to go back and listen to it again. And this is the second time I'm hearing this from you, because as you're saying it, I'm kind of remembering our conversation like, oh yeah, I'm glad she's reminding me because I didn't even remember that. And so then, as far as building muscle, like I've heard, especially what I'm worried about now is I'm over 50. I'm in menopause. So I'm a little further along than you. And here I am sitting around for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. It's been more than 8 weeks. And
Yep.
I'm worried like my muscles are deteriorating. I'm going to have to build those back up. But after 50 and during menopause, I think it's harder to do that. But you had some specific advice for how to lift and how to make gains. What do you think about weightlifting, and have you added that, and how, and why?
Yeah. So I'm somewhat ashamed to admit this because I took the menopause course close to 3 years ago now. And it's one of those things that, like, knowing what I needed to do, I conceptually knew it, but I was having a hard time making that happen in my life. Um, and there's been a couple of things that have happened in the last however long. The most recent is uh, Michelle Obama has a podcast called In My Opinion, and she had Bruce Springsteen on here, and they were talking about parenting, but the idea of you're not going to become the world's best parent overnight. Like, it takes all the little moments all along the way to basically be a good parent. But her comment was that you have to keep putting the pennies in the bank. And I would say the one thing for you to keep in mind right now is you put pennies in the bank. So I did listen to your podcast with, I can't remember your coach. Is it Nick?
Nick, yeah, Nick.
Yeah. Yep. And he was very right to tell you that, like, you started with pennies in your bank. You've started with more than pennies. You've got dollars. You've got hundreds of dollars in there. And all you can keep doing. And right now you're withdrawing more pennies than you're putting in. And that's okay, because you've built yourself a pretty steady budget and you've got a long ways to go before your lights start flashing on your dashboard. So,
I
like,
love
keep
that
that in mind.
analogy because I do accounting, like
Yep.
that's how my brain works. So that analogy is like perfect for me. So, and I
Yeah.
appreciate
So,
hearing it again. It's always good to have
but
the reminder. But go ahead.
yeah, for sure. I was just going to say that the menopause course, I feel like, just taught you of how you can put pennies into your bank, and which things will put the most pennies in the bank for the least amount of time. And this is all from Stacy Sims. So again, like, this is not something I've come up with. This is her. It's a fantastic course. Again, I'd recommend anybody take it. First thing that I incorporated was last November, I started lifting. And to be fair, with both of my shoulders having been messed up, I started swimming last July, so I've done it for a year. Um, with the frozen shoulder, I think when I first started, I could barely get my arm to clear the water before it splashed back into it again, and it wasn't very elegant at all. Um, but it was one of those, like, keep putting pennies in my bank, and by November, I had enough motion in it that I felt like I could start lifting and not go crazy and hurt something. So, general thing behind mobility is, if you can't move your limb, arm, whatever, in a specific direction and it's tight, you can't just stretch because your body has tightened it for a reason. It's because the muscle that's supposed to allow you to move that direction isn't strong enough. And so it's tightened the ligament or the tendon to prevent you from moving in that direction where you can hurt yourself. And so I don't know if you've noticed, like a lot of people as they get older, their whole posterior chain goes, they start leaning forward, they'll shuffle, and their legs really only, their knees don't bend very much, and the toes go in front of the older person, and they never really carry their leg behind them. And it's because all that sort of muscle chain has deteriorated over time. And that happens, with perimenopause and beyond. And so if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And so I had to start with pretty basic things to even like, all right, before I can, so Stacy Sims' tagline is lift heavy. I'll say stuff on this because I don't know if you're allowed to cuss, but she fills that in with a slightly different word at the end. And so her LHS sort of policy is that you want steady progressive overloads where you're lifting stuff that's significantly heavy. And that sort of as you keep lifting, you keep pushing that boundary of what you can do. And so I think I finally started doing deadlifts, and well, I started out doing squats because I could do those without using my arms, and then I moved on to deadlifts by February, and I'm sort of slowly still working my way up. As I've gone up, I've ended up with sore spots and been from poor form, and I've had to back up and sort of work on a different muscle group to make sure I can handle that kind of weight. And so I won't say I'm breaking any lifting records by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm making steady progress in that direction. And I feel like that in and of itself, I could almost immediately feel muscles go on. And for me, I feel like having been in this state where I could just kept continually losing muscle mass because of the diet and the low protein, that it just felt good that even if things were fitting tighter, they're fitting tighter because I was putting muscle on. And I just had to be in a place that I'm okay with that because I'm going to have to go through this to get to the other side of it. So my metabolism is not going to speed up until I have enough muscle that burns it at a high enough rate. And so I'm just going to have to be okay with being big. It's just it's a step in the process, and it's something I may never get fully to the other side of. I may never lose the extra weight, but I feel like if I'm moving in a good direction, that's a good thing. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting in the weeds. Yeah, so her things are lift heavy stuff, and then sprint interval workouts. She also touches on HIIT interval workouts. They're very different.
Before we
Sprint.
get there, though, tell
Yep.
me about your lifting.
hmm
Where do you do it? And like lift heavy, like what about even a specific amount of reps? Or do you do like as heavy as you can possibly do for short reps? Or do you do different sets of lighter weights? Tell me more specifics, even though you're getting
Yeah.
these.
So, short thing is I'm spoiled. We work at a university. It has a pool, it has a gym, the whole nine yards. So that's where I work out. Um, the As far as what that looks like, I feel like when I'm talking about strengthening a specific thing, to be fair, starting with my shoulder, I'm talking about like 3 and 5 pound weights. And those were for probably reps of if I could do more than 12 reps for a 3 set thing, then I would move up the weight the next time. And so for the most part, I didn't ever want to get to the point that I was waving a weight around in the air so long and then not moving on to a different muscle group. And so my general sort of thing was, do a set, and I would start out doing it for 8 reps because generally I'd moved up one. And if I got to the point that I could easily hit 12 reps, okay, then it's time up to move up to the next. So that was kind of the base level work just to get things strong enough to go up. And then once you're talking about what she calls compound movements, so you're looking at a squat or a deadlift, chest presses, those kind of things where you're recruiting multiple parts of your body to move a large weight around. For me, um, I skirt the side of I don't do the two fatigue, and I do know some people that do, and the only reason I don't is because I'm not good at knowing where that point is. So I've given myself rhabdo before, I've done a bunch of other things. I know enough to not trust myself to push myself that far because you can really hurt yourself with weightlifting. And so I have to dial back that because I think I want to be able to, use this body for much of my adult life, as much as I
Yeah.
physically possibly can. And so for me, I err on the side of I'll add weight on. And if I can't do more than 3 reps with being like, ooh, I'm losing good form, then I'll drop it back. And I usually err on the side of being heavier than I need to be. And so I'll usually either keep it where I'm at or I'll add a 2.5 pound. I know it sounds silly to go in 2.5 pound increments, but I'm still at a place where that feels like a lot of weight when I add it initially. Um, and if the piece of equipment I'm on doesn't let me move in things that small, or that particular weight machine is busy, um, you know, I'll use some things that, have more protections in place, and I'll focus on an individual muscle group. But when I'm talking about those big, heavy things, yeah, I mean, for the most part, I just go on feel, and there's days I go in and I don't have it. And
And you
it's
do
frustrating
that
because,
2 times a week, 3 times a week, every other day, every third day?
at the moment I'm doing it Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes also an additional on Friday. It sort of depends what I've got going on. For me, it's just because it's when I'm at work. And it's easy to incorporate that in. I think generally they would recommend you doing it every other, so the Thursday, Friday isn't always the best. And if I do have a week like that, I'll try to do one day that I'm focusing more on legs, and the next that I'm doing like more core and upper body or something. But yeah, I think her general recommendation is 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah. So also, you've talked a lot about frozen shoulder, and we
Yep.
haven't really defined what that is and how that happened. Can you tell us what that is and what's the cause?
Yeah, so essentially all of your muscles and joints and that thing are coated in connective tissue. Your ligaments and muscles, or your ligaments and tendons are bigger chunks of that, and that's, things that we look at getting repaired. But I mean, when you go to pull a steak apart and you can see kind of that clear film between all the different muscle groups, that's what we're talking about. And so that basically, encapsulates each muscle group and allows them to slide as a unit past one another. And the short version is it's an autoimmune response. It can also happen as an autoimmune response related to trauma and then surgery. So I know Mark Latanzi has had it before when he had shoulder surgery, and it was required that it was immobile for a certain number of weeks afterwards. General idea behind it is your body feels like that joint is no longer safe. And so instead of those two pieces of connective tissue sliding past each other, they actually start forming adhesions between all those layers. So when you try to move your bicep, you can't, because it doesn't move independently from your tricep, and it doesn't move independently from your shoulder joint, and it doesn't move independently from your tendon. And so when you try moving any of those, you just jerk another piece of your body. And the harder it gets, I basically could not move my upper shoulder at all, and all I could do is bend it at the elbow.
So does that come on slowly, or is it all of a sudden? Like, did you wonder if it was from something specific that you did?
I think this gets a bit into like the gray areas of life, and you I won't ever know.
Yeah.
There's some evidence that it could be related to what shoulder I had my COVID shot in. Um, I still wouldn't change whether or not I got the vaccine, but it could have been a factor. Um, they also think COVID, there's quite a few kids across Europe that their version of the vaccine, a lot of kids that come down with that, like the autoimmune version of diabetes, where your body attacks your thyroid and kills it. And so they think that there's a lot, and that didn't necessarily happen with the vaccine. It also happened with the contraction of COVID. And so I don't think we've worked out everything that sort of will have gone sideways for people through that process. Um, there's some evidence that, I mean, it's really fascinating. Dr. Gabor, I can't think of his last name. He was on Mel Robbins' podcast. He's sort of an expert in autoimmune disease. He says it's like frozen shoulder is most common in women between the ages of 40 and 60. And when I would ask any of the doctors why it happened to me, they're like, you're a woman between the ages of 40 and 60. I'm like, great. I can't do anything about either of those things. So tell me something I can do something about. Anyhow, he said it when you look at women, so 80% of the people with autoimmune disorders are women. When you look at them, generally, there tend to be the people that are duty and role bound. They tend to not show anger, healthy anger. They'll sort of just suck it up and keep going on. They tend to feel like they're responsible for other people's emotions and kind of shrink and adjust themselves to the people around them. And like there's sort of this series of traits that are
I
common.
just feel like you're just describing any woman. I mean, I know that's
Yes.
stereotypical, but it makes you wonder about the causality of it. Like it may not be
So
related to
his
that at
comment
all. But
is that autoimmune diseases aren't endemic to women because they're women and that's their genetics, that it's because it's cultural.
and frozen shoulder, I thought I had heard that it could be due to menopause. That
So
and
it,
that
it
made
does
me
happen more
think
often.
it could
Yep.
be due to hormonal changes, which none of what you said is necessarily hormonal. But anyway, it's
There is some
one more
evidence
thing for
around that
women to
as
look
well.
forward to.
Yeah.
This
There is
extra
some
risk.
evidence of more connective tissue disorders with the decrease in hormones. Basically, you get a decrease in elasticity and a bunch of other things. So that is also a cofactor.
Oh, so great.
But
Love
it's
getting
hard.
old.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, this is where the get curious part, right? So like I
Yeah.
went down all these rabbit holes and did a boatload of research, but I think at the end of the day, like the causality, it was under 12% with any of those things. So
Interesting. Hmm.
the jury's really out. When you don't have more than 12% actual causality with anything, you don't have causality, you have hypothesis. So
Okay. All right. So anyway, to get back to where we were, you were
yep,
saying that you lift heavy, but you also add in sprints. I think
yep.
you were headed that direction.
Yeah. So, sort of the idea behind this is there's a couple things you lose, and there's some things you can get from sprint interval workouts training, sprint intensity interval training. It's two I's. I don't think it's intensity interval, or the two I's. But sprint is an effort that you can only hold for up to 30 seconds. Like it is as close to 100% as you can put yourself in, and then you're doing 100%. Well, you're doing a full recovery where you are breathing easily, you're comfortable, and you can truly hit the next one at 100%. And you stop when you can't hit 100% or you lose form so that you don't injure yourself. And that one, what it really produces, so estrogen does a lot of pretty cool things for your body. If you're a young woman, appreciate your estrogen. It's friggin' awesome. It protects your heart. It does all kinds of really rad things in your body that you really don't realize you've lost. And to a certain degree, it puts you at the same health risk as men. But we've had all these protections all of our life and we haven't realized it. um, so appreciate your estrogen while you have it. But it helps a lot with a ton of things, everything from inflammation to a bunch of other stuff. And one of those things is myosin heads on. So your muscles basically have these little filaments that allow the muscle to contract past and they relax back and they retract. Anyhow, that is a strength, that head. And if you ever hear someone that's pulled or severely injured a muscle and they can't move it completely, it's actually because they broke that head off and they have to wait for that myosin head to grow back. So those actually get stronger. So your myosin heads are reactive to estrogen, but lo and behold, your body also produces a ton of what they call androgens. Basically, any sort of all your sex-based hormones are cholesterol-based, so they're made from a fat. And your androgens are also made from a fat and have a similar response in your body, but you don't get the kind of fluctuation in your androgen hormones that you do in estrogen and progesterone. And so menopause is crazy because in the early onsets, it's not that you're not producing estrogen. It's just that like your ovaries are like, nope, not doing it. Don't care. Not going to make it today. And all of a sudden they're like, here's all the estrogen for the month. And then like, yep, no more estrogen again. And so it's not that you're producing no estrogen. It's that you go from no to a ton, no to a ton, no to a ton, no to a ton. And then your body's also losing the number of receptors that are available to it. So the number of cells that can take in estrogen are also going down. And so your body just starts doing things that you're like, wait a minute, this didn't work this way before. I don't understand. So one of the ways you can help to kind of counteract that is to have your body's androgens produce the response that estrogen would. And one of the ways you can make it do that is through exercise. And so lifting heavy weights, Does a lot around neuromuscular strength and actual strengthening of muscle fibers. Sprint interval training is going to do a bunch for you as far as recruiting those actin and myosin heads for quick, strong contraction of fast twitch muscles. It's going to do a ton for what they call neuroplasticity and your ability to recruit muscles. So part of what you lose as you get older is as the brain sends a signal for your muscle to actually contract powerfully. And it's so in kids that they have a lot of pruning of nerves as they get older. And if you have someone that like loses the ability to do something, and then as they've lost that thing, the other sense kind of comes in and can help fill that space, kind of a thing. That's the body's ability to change neuroplasticity. And so the same idea is true with sort of aging and losing that ability to have a strong muscle contraction. You'll lose it if you don't use it. And so one of the ways to prevent yourself from losing it or to gain back bits that you've missed is through sprint interval training.
And so sprint interval training, you're saying 30 seconds, go as hard as you possibly can to where you think you can't go any harder. And that can be during any type of aerobic activity or any type of cardio activity. Like
I mean, you can do it with weights,
or whether
you can do it with a bike, you can do it. Too. You can anything you want to do.
Okay.
And then your high intensity interval training, so your HIIT exercise is also valuable. So that's at like 80%. And you're looking at maybe a 5-minute effort's the max you could do there. And that actually has a lot of good things around what estrogen would formerly have done for your blood vessels. It's kind of complicated, but it also works into hot flashes.
Okay, so before you go on though, let me just understand what you consider a HIIT interval workout. What would that look like?
A lot of it's done in circuits. So like you do 30 kettlebell swings, and then you do a sprint, and then you do box jumps, and then you do. Stacy Sims has a ton of examples on it, and the short version is that you're moving your body as much as you can in a full body thing, and you are just going hard, but not so hard that you can't continue it for 5 minutes. It's the kind of thing that you're winded, you're leaning over at the knees, and then it's also characterized by you do not fully recover between each set. You'll give yourself a recovery time, but unlike sprint interval, where you want to be able to hit it at that same intensity so that you're building the thing, over HIIT, you're going to dribble.
Yeah.
So if it was a running sort of a thing, you think of like a fartlek, where you're doing, a slow effort, a medium effort, and then a really hard effort. But that you're going to cycle in and out of those things, and you're not going to stop and fully recover the way you would in a sprint interval workout.
And how long would you do that for?
This is one of those, I think she recommends starting at 2 sets, seeing how you feel, and then building from there. So I think everybody's going to be a little bit different. For the most part, what you just find is what you can do at 80% just increases. So your kettlebell has to get bigger, your sprints faster, or whatever else. That's usually where you improve rather than adding the time. But yeah, you're looking for something usually between a 3 and 5 minute mark, some sort of almost like a circuit. A lot of things around burpees I've seen. So the idea of that you're just getting your heart rate up, you're recruiting multiple muscle groups, that kind of thing. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for all of that clarity.
Sure.
Yeah. What about deloading? That was a thing you had said is something to, work into your training schedule.
That's probably been the neatest bit of exercise physiology I've learned, and it's to do with weightlifting specifically. And the idea is that you're constantly working towards a progressive overload, but every 3 to 4 weeks you actually put in what they call a deload week. And that doesn't mean you don't go in and lift, but you're not lifting heavy. You're focusing on the muscle group that you know that you're going to need to build more strength in to carry more weight because you're weak in a particular direction. It's kind of any niggles kind of a thing. And I will say, for me, they've kind of been built in either because of life or the gym closes periodically because of the academic schedule, which is sort of worked out well. But it's been fascinating because I think I was always like, well, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it kind of thing. But it's been really miraculous because I'll take basically a week off from lifting something pretty heavy, and I'll be like, all right, I'm going to put on the same weight I had, the week prior to this deload week, and I'm just going to see it. And the first time I did it, and I could pick up the bar easily, I was like, what weight? How? What? I don't understand. But basically, I mean, everyone should always put them in all along, but it becomes especially important as you hit sort of menopause because, again, estrogen is friggin' awesome. One of its major things it does is decrease inflammation. And exercise is great, and it does have, I think they call it like a cytokine something thing that basically decreases inflammation, which is what makes it a good stress instead of a bad stress, but it does produce inflammation as well. And so it's hard unless it's your job as an athlete to recover. I'm sure you can relate with the swelling related to your leg.
Yes.
You have to do a lot to help your body get rid of the inflammation. And the short version is that deload week allows you to push enough inflammation out of normal rotation that your body actually has time to build neuromuscular connections and repair muscles stronger. So remember that whole catabolic anabolic thing? Like you have to break down a muscle in order to make it stronger, but it needs time to complete that. And if it's not done yet and you put a heavy weight on it again, it's never going to be complete. And so
Yeah.
the idea with that deload week is that you actually get more gains by taking a step back than you do
How
if you would
often do you have a deload week?
every 3 to 4 weeks, usually.
All right. So, what have we missed? What else? What else helps you? Um, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a gazillion things. I mean, the folks on the thing don't know this, but you came up to our house and spent a weekend with us, and while my husband and Chip were on a bike ride, we sat there and yapped for the better part of an afternoon. And I don't think they probably want to hear every place we went with our conversation, but suffice it to say that life is interesting. And yeah, the more you can get curious about why your body does what. It's really a neat thing to start delving into. And then and again, I think one of the beauty of finding someone you can trust, specifically around women's exercise science, which I feel safe in the hands of Stacy Sims, that you can start implementing these things and just see what happens. And I think it's just pretty awesome. I think what I love most about Stacy Sims was her comment was get started with 15 minutes a day. And so when I initially started lifting weights, I would literally go in and squats and a couple other things because I couldn't do a lot with my shoulder for 15 minutes in my work clothes. I didn't even bother to change into workout clothes. And if it was only 15 minutes and I wasn't going to get sweaty and disgusting, that was easy for me to knock out. And sort of the same thing around sprint interval training. So I've been swimming for about a year, and since November, it's about 1,500 meters twice a week. And that takes a fair amount of time. And so I haven't been super keen on like where I'm going to add the sprint interval training in. And finally, I was just like, I'm going to get up 15 minutes earlier. And I'm just going to do as many hill sprints in that time as I can before I lose my form. And then I'm going to go into the pool. I'm going to dive in. And I'm going to get into my swim. And start somewhere. Remember, it's the pennies in the bank. In those 15 minutes, if I can put in $1 worth of pennies, as opposed to spending that hour swimming, I probably only put 50 pennies in my health bank. Find the things that give you the most bang for your buck, and that's where a lot of the advice of Stacy Sims is just amazing.
Yeah.
And then to have Simon Hill and the proof and his sort of analysis of things has been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
As far
Well,
as
you've been pretty
diet.
awesome. Yeah.
Not at all.
You've been motivating too. So I appreciate you sharing all this. Do you have any goals on your horizon? Any races or any not races that you have on the horizon?
Yeah, I think the our daughter's getting married in September, so we're going out for that. And then shortly after that, we have a bike trip we always do with a friend of ours, Tom. And so we're doing the Bitterroot 300. We're adding about 150 miles to the start of that to get to my from my aunt's house in Spokane out to Wallace, Idaho. And
Oh,
so looking
fun.
forward to that. That's the second week of September. And then we just signed up yesterday for the fall foliage and the Two Rivers. So our daughter lives in Philly now.
Oh,
And
great.
when she found out that the Two Rivers was in Philly, she was like, I'm on board. She's done a couple of shorter races with us. This will be her first 24 hours. So
Oh, that's
excited to do
exciting.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the fall foliage one you're talking about is 24 hours?
Fall foliage
Or-
is 13. That was in Harper's Ferry
That's right.
in October. My
That's
brother
right.
lives just north of there, has a dairy farm there. So
That's right. Which is the 24-hour one you were talking about?
the Two Rivers in
The Two
Philly. That's
Rivers.
in
That's right. Okay.
November. Yep.
So the fall foliage, I think they're also offering a 5-hour option,
I
which
saw that.
I
Yeah.
kind of wonder if I'll be able to sign up for that.
You
I,
should.
I think I need to wait to see how I'm coming along, but that might be far enough along that I can, choose my checkpoints, go at my own pace,
Yep.
and see my friends, which
Yep.
would
Yep.
really help me a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll put a lot of this stuff in the show notes, and I do have a few other things on the list that we just didn't get to, and they're nitty gritty.
Yeah. That's all right.
But I'm looking over just one more time. Yeah, I think we hit a lot of things, and I think all of us are going to get there someday, and even the men in our lives should listen to this. It's
Yeah.
it's just it's refreshing hearing advice from another woman who's been through, similar things, and just the acknowledgement that everything out there is primarily from men who were studied and not women. I
Yep.
mean, there's that's just there's still a lot to learn. I know.
Yeah. The only other bit I'll add on to this, um, I know a while back, I think we shared with you that we'd gone keto before we did our first expedition race we did together was the Shenandoah Tough. I don't think they've done that one since it got sort of rained out by a hurricane and they
Yeah,
pulled all of his permits.
that's
But
right.
we did that for that one. And for me, like it helped to a certain extent, and then I felt like it started going backwards. And what I found fascinating with Stacy Sims was the idea that um, by nature of you being XX, that means that you can actually access the short chain fatty acid chain without any prompting. So
So
women are
you
much
need
more
to put that
metabolically.
in, like, yeah. I interrupted you before you were probably already going to say what that really means. So go ahead.
Yeah, basically means you can switch back and forth from glucose as a source to fat as a source
Just by
as
being a woman.
calories come. Yep, as calories come on board, and women, by virtue of you being XX, are very good at that. Um, Men are not, which is why you typically have to drop carbohydrate availability in order for their body to build the machinery to switch to a fat burning. But women do that very well.
I
Um,
had forgotten that you told me that, and that's a great reminder. Chip and I have done keto-ish
yep,
diets.
yep,
I don't know that we've ever made it to full, just, stand or really strict keto.
yeah,
But, my version of keto has primarily just been higher protein, less simple carbs, and still trying to have some good carbs in there. I think Chip's version of keto has been keto, except that he can have alcohol. So
yeah,
there's, he gets his carbs from, the drinks, and um,
yeah,
I don't know. So it's kind of been interesting that we've dabbled in that, and I didn't realize that that would be essentially easier for a female to go back and forth like that. So we don't necessarily have to practice being in ketosis. We can just go with it.
yeah. I mean, it's what's responsible. Like when you look at the ultras, and like Courtney Dauwalter isn't quite, hasn't beat the fastest ultra marathoner out there that's male, but she's in the top 1% of sort of all humans. And it's
Yeah.
because the longer you go, women's ability to do that and to keep providing their body energy narrows the sex differences.
Isn't that so cool?
It is.
I
It
love
really is.
that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe that speaks a little bit towards, adventure racing where you see a lot of the top teams usually being co-ed.
Yep.
These endurance events that might play in our favor. That's cool. All right,
Yeah.
now is there anything we missed?
Nope. I
No.
could keep rambling, so just cut me off.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate you sharing all this stuff and telling me again. Maybe this time I'll remember. And like I said,
No.
I'll probably also listen to our podcast again because I'm nerdy that way. Um, all
You
right.
guys put out some good ones.
Well, thanks. And everyone out there, thanks for listening. And we'll see you later.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please take a moment to leave a rating and a comment. To find additional content, including the video versions of these discussions, you can search for Disability Racing on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
We hope this podcast inspired you to focus on your abilities and plan your next adventure.
See you on the trail.